Now, social media is growing by the day, and many of us are wondering what new trends will emerge this year. Last year saw some massive changes with social media giant Twitter after multi-billionaire Elon Musk purchased it and became its CEO, from firing dozens of staff members to releasing what he calls the Twitter files. So what should we expect from social media this year, particularly in our country? Well, to help us answer this, a trendsetter and partner at Flux Trends, Bronwyn Williams, join us this hour here on Today. Bronwyn, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time here on Today on eNCA. So when you just look ahead in terms of trends, what should we brace ourselves to be new or different when it comes to social media in our country in 2023?
Well, one of the things that we have been looking at is this shift from open social media, or social media as we know it, towards more closed forms of social media. And here, closed forms would be things like WhatsApp chat groups, obviously growing in popularity, but also the shifting of conversations, both with brands and consumers and with various different groups or consumers or population groups that we have with our families, with our friends, with everything else, moving towards more closed door environments. And here we can look particularly at the rise of what's happening with platforms like Discord and Slack. So Slack, of course, was set up originally for more corporate type communications, which is where it has its niche. And Discord, very similarly, has come out of the world of the metaverse, or from the fringes of the metaverse. So we already have communities there which are relating to gaming platforms, and also with regards to a lot of things that were going on in the crypto world, where these communities were already having conversations and have built up these kind of closed door social networks. And we're seeing more and more niche communities, both from the corporate sector and again then from the private sector too, then setting up camp in these spaces where conversations are kind of open but not entirely open. It's almost a throwback to the days of the forum-based internet. If any of us, or those of us that are old enough to remember back in the days of MySpace and internet forums, this idea that perhaps not all conversations should be open to everyone. There's various reasons for this. Censorship and what's going on is one of those conversations. There's also, of course, these huge issues around the debates around both anonymity, which many people think should be reduced in social media, but other people think should be increased because it allows whistleblowers, for example, which I think you alluded to with like those Twitter files and things, a space to actually have conversations they could get in trouble with if they weren't able to hide behind some sorts of an avatar. But also then this push towards more authenticity. So having conversations that are more real and less filtered, both in a literal and a figurative sense. In a figurative sense, less filtered in terms of fear of censorship or being kicked off a platform like Twitter, especially if it's now under new managements and what those new rules are, but also authenticity with regards to, in a more literal sense, to having less filters put on our faces. And they're one of the bellwethers that came out of last year that's still not quite gone away. Is the rise of brand new social media platforms, the likes of Be Real, which only allow users to post unfiltered pictures to, again, quite a small group, again, coming back to this trend of more closed open social networks, if that makes any sense. And this idea that perhaps not everything that we put onto social media should be filtered, so we all end up looking like sort of clones of the popular celebrities of the day. So authenticity, of course, one of those things, the debate around anonymity, and then more closed type social media networks, three big things to look out for. And then the other one that's worth mentioning is the shifting definition of what a social network really is. We kind of see social networks as being part of the Web 2.0, but social networks going into the Web 3 era, which we're now talking about with the rise of decentralized networks and the metaverse and all those exciting things again, we're starting to see that definition of what a social network is shifting. In that, of course, communicating with people in metaverse type platforms, whether that is a game or whether that is any other sort of online extra reality, augmented reality space, can also be seen as a social network. It might actually be more intuitive and more human than the very 2D social networks we have been used to today. So those are some of the trends we think are quite interesting at the moment.
Yeah, the idea of closed, open social media platforms is like a contradiction in terms, because I wonder how long would it take for it to remain closed? I mean, we've seen how things find their ways on all sorts of platforms when originally they were intended for one.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why the Be Real platform, again, is generating quite a lot of conversation. Myself, I'm not convinced that that platform is going to be having any longer impact than the likes of Clubhouse had. But it's an interesting idea in that how they've made it both closed and open is you can connect to anyone you want, but you're limited to 500 people you can connect with. And if you remember, Facebook also used to have a limit on the number of users that you could connect with or friend with, which kind of makes sense if you understand how human networks work. We're only able to process in our brains and actually maintain real conversations and real networks with a certain number of people. We all know about sort of Dunbar's number. As we get past a couple of hundred people, we can't remember who they are, and it becomes impersonal social media rather than personal social media. So it almost becomes quite antisocial. And as networks do become bigger, that's when, of course, we have the rise of trolls and people who think they can get away with saying anything to anyone, even very hurtful, very destructive things, because we don't actually feel the other person on the other side of that network is real to us. Yeah. So there's various mechanisms that can be used to limit those things. But Discord, again, is the one that I keep coming back to that senses a real shift in that regard. Discord really limits the amount of people that can connect around any sort of topic or any sort of forum that's going on in that platform, simply because it becomes too overwhelming to keep up to date with all of those different feeds. So you're going to focus your attention on the ones that you are most interested in, which over time means that you are building more of a sort of personalized reality tunnel that's tailored towards your views and the sort of people that connect with you, rather than being exposed to everyone out there in the great big world. Okay. And of course, that's got both positive and negative aspects to it. Positive in that like-minded people can form sort of tribes around ideas that resonate with them, and you can build more real relationships. It can also be perhaps be a bit negative, which I think we are going to see in these sort of more closed off social networks, in that those various different groups and communities and this much more fragmented way of dealing with social networks means that we do tend to surround ourselves with echo chambers. So this could be an indication that we're going to see even more polarization in our worldviews in the real world, whereas open social media brought those sort of tensions between different political ideologies out into the open arena. It's almost a kind of dangerous thing when those diverging views go in separate directions and stop talking to each other altogether. And I think from a South African perspective, from a political perspective, I think this is a particularly interesting, potentially dangerous, but also potentially interesting for other reasons, trend to watch as we come up towards the election cycle.
Especially this year, Bronwyn, because next year is general elections. It's going to be very interesting to watch that space. My final question to you, and if you can be brief, I would appreciate it. We've got the platforms. You've mentioned that there could be some new, we don't know if they're going to see some new social media platforms. There's this new closed, open kinds of platforms, social media networking that's on the rise. But when you look at platforms particularly, the likes of your TikTok, the likes of your Instagram, the likes of your Twitter, the likes of your YouTube. Are you foreseeing that there could be some excitement there this year?
Well, I think that those platforms all still have their role. They all cater to slightly different markets, but they also have all fragmented our attention. So if you are a brand, or if you are a public figure, or you hope to become an influencer or a key opinion leader, you kind of have to have a presence on all of those platforms. You can't afford to throw any of them away right now. They're all competing for our attention all of the time. And we just need to remember, as individuals engaging with social networks, that in this brave new Web3 metaverse social media world we're walking into, the only really scarce commodity is you and your attention, and whatever you give attention to, we're going to get more of. So hopefully you pay attention to things that you want to see more of. That'd be my best advice for you this year. Okay,
I'm going to stick to LinkedIn. Thank you very much. Bronwyn Williams, partner at Flux Trends. Please pass our regards to Dion Cheng there. That's Bronwyn's colleague, whom we also speak to now and again here on eNCA.